Welcome everyone. Today we're going to do some tests to see what actually affects your fuel economy in Farming Simulator 19. If this is what you're looking for, please stay tuned. Alright folks, so in this test video I'm going to perform several different tests, and we'll kind of use that to kind of develop a analysis or a just kind of a conclusion for what can actually affect how fast your tractor or equipment is burning fuel in Farming Simulator. Now, I can't test every single possibility, but I've devised a few tests to test 6 aspects of fuel consumption. So we're going to test those 6 aspects of it just to see, you know, if it actually affects it or anything like that. I'm going to go ahead and first off, I'm going to save the game where we're at. Save. Okay. So I have 2 tractors here. I'm actually also going to do that to off. So I'm going to get in with the first, well, actually, let me just talk about a little bit more about the test. So the 6 aspects I'm going to test to see if it matters is if you have a tractor with more horsepower, is it going to burn more fuel? Does it matter if you're moving the tractor, as in driving it, or it's sitting stationary, if it burns more or less fuel either way? Does it matter if you're hauling something? I'm not talking about running an implement, because that's another thing I want to test. I want to see if, like, I have a full trailer with 30,000 liters of something, is it going to burn more fuel to travel with that over a set period of time? All these are going to be based on time frames, just to make it more simplified, not distance. Though I may do a distance test with the hauling later on, but we'll see how this goes and how much time this is going to take. The fourth thing I want to test is if I have an implement running. So as you know, like, for example, these have power takeoffs on the front and the rear. So I'm going to put something on the back of it, which actually you can't see it on here. I'm going to put something on the back of this tractor that has a power takeoff on it. I'm going to see if that affects the fuel usage, having that on versus off. Because as you probably know from playing the game, if you turn something on, the engine sounds like it's revving a lot more and it's, you know, using more energy. So I'm just going to test and see if that aspect's actually applicable here. I'm also going to test and see if the speed it travels at burns fuel faster. So I'm going to have one of these drive at 5 miles an hour for, 5 minutes and see how much fuel it burns. I'm going to have another one drive at 10 miles an hour, then 15, 20. I mean, I might do probably a 5 mile an hour one and like a 20 mile an hour one and see if there is a difference. And if there is, we'll take a look further into that. But again, we'll do generic tests and we'll get more specific if there's more information we want to find out. And the final thing I want to test is going to be the repair. So is like a tractor that's in poor repair going to take or use more fuel, or a tractor in good condition going to use less fuel? We're going to see, or if it matters at all. So this first test I have devised here is to test a couple of things. Well, actually, this is test 1. They're going to remain stationary. We're not comparing to see stationary or moving in this test. We're comparing horsepower. This is a 270. This is a 300. So I'm going to hop in them. I did drive them down here from the store, but to make sure everything's fair, I'm going to go into this menu here. I'm going to go over to vehicle. We're going to set the operating time to 0. Oh, sorry, that's a different deal there. We need to set that to 0. Adjust wear down to 0. Dirt to 0. We might test dirt as well. We'll see. And we are going to fill it all the way with diesel. So it's all the way full and it's next to a tank, so I can hit that and I can fill it up to see and compare the 10,000 to what was put in it to see how much fuel it burned. I'm going to run this test until these guys hit 0.1 hours on there, which is going to be a tenth of an hour. So that's going to be 6 minutes. So we're going to do a 6-minute test on these guys, right? That's correct math, right? Yeah, 10 times 6, 60 minutes. Okay. So just to use that as a timer instead of a human timer. So this one's good to go. This is the 270. So we're doing the horsepower comparison. So I'll run this test and then I'll bring you guys back in after this test is done, and then we'll set up for another test. All right, folks, so I finished up the test. I was going to bring you guys back in, but I decided not to. There was a lot of different things I was testing there. I didn't do necessarily all the tests that I wanted to do, but I'm actually going to flip back on my notebook here to get to the original questions I wanted to answer, and I think I've answered them all to a degree. There's so many just possibilities and variables that I can't possibly go over all of them. So yeah, let's just pull up the chart here, and then we'll go through some of it. Okay, so starting at the top, the first test I ran, stationary. You can see on the stationary column that's if it was moving or not in distance traveled in kilometers, fuel in liters that was used. And actually, that's a note on that real quick. So instead of using my original method of using those. I decided not to do that. What I did was I would save everything where I needed it to, and then in the menu here, if I go over to here, it shows me exactly how many liters are used in driving distance, which right now it's a little random because I was just moving stuff around, so that has nothing to do with any of the tests. So it shows me those down to obviously in 100th, so that's a pretty accurate reading there. So I use that instead of, I could only read within 1 liter, so I figured that'd be much more accurate. So that's how I actually read my tests out. That's why I have the very specific numbers that you see on here. So for horsepower, it did not seem to matter in general stationary. They weren't moving. 10 minutes, I let them run. They both burned 0.77 liters of fuel, 280 horsepower, 313. I don't know if that's different for other tractors. Again, I can only test certain aspects because I don't have the time to test all of them. This alone took me several hours to get this test done, just from setting it up and running all the tests. Now, if we go down to fully repaired, not repaired, that was a stationary test. So if the tractor is fully repaired, let it run for 10 minutes, and then one that had 0 on the repair bar, let it run for 10 minutes, and that did affect it. So if it was fully repaired, it had 0.77, which makes sense. That's what we were running up above. And I did most of all the tests down below. So I did the repair test, the implement, the full throttle, and the speed test down there, all with the 313 horsepower tractor. Then I did obviously the bottom test with hauling. The horsepower was now in question again, so I changed the horsepower. What I noticed here is, yes, you need to repair your vehicles in order to get the best fuel economy from them. So that is what I noticed from that. Then if we go down to implement on or off, I did the stationary. I think moving, it's going to be similar, and I'll explain why later on. For 10 minutes, stationary, 0 distance traveled. If the implement was on, so I just used the butterfly mower, which you saw in a second. Used 11.98 liters of fuel sitting there with it just on. That's the implement, that is. So obviously that burns more fuel. That makes sense. That's not unanticipated. Then the full throttle test. So I did this one for 5 minutes because now it's a little bit harder to just drive a vehicle, and I don't have as much space and stuff like that. So it's just a little bit easier to do a shorter test. You can double it if you really want to see the results compared to other things for the 5-minute tests. So full throttle stationary, I did one stationary, I did one not stationary. The one that was not stationary traveled 2.67 kilometers, and it used about half as much fuel, which I thought was kind of surprising. Let me make sure I wrote that number down, because I'm looking at it and I'm like, that seems crazy, but I'm pretty sure I wrote down the right number. Yep, sure did. Okay. Yeah, because 2.26 doubled is 4.52. So anyhow, yeah, so it used more, and I'll show you kind of how I did that test here. Actually, let's do that real quick. So let's pull those results off of there. So I had, for the stationary tests, I just had a tractor aimed at one of these, and I just let it didn't move at all. The distance showed 0 inside, and I hit 3 to turn cruise control on, full throttle right into this bad boy. And then the moving one, I just let it drive, and then I would steer it occasionally to avoid hills and things, and stuff like that. So just to note on that. And then if we go back over to the chart, going down to the speed test, the speed mattered a little bit. So at 5 miles per hour, I did all these tests over the course of 5 minutes. Distance was 0.46 kilometers, then 0.87, then 1.68. And a 1.59, 162, and 173. So a little bit more fuel burn on 20 miles per hour. And then if we go down to, well, actually, we'll go over the hauling one last, because the hauling one will make sense. So based on the results I'm getting, it seems that if the tractor sounds like it's working harder, or it is working harder, it's burning more fuel, that seems realistic. The reason the stationary test, I believe, burned more fuel at full throttle is because it's always working to try to get going. It's always trying the hardest to get past this object that it can't get past, versus the one that is just driving. Once it hits top speed on a flat surface, it's not having to work as hard to keep going. So I think that is the main difference. And then with the speed ones, if we go back over to the speed ones, at 5 miles per hour, it has to work less hard to get up to 5 miles per hour. 10 miles per hour has to work a little bit harder. 20 miles per hour has to work even harder. So that's why there's a slight difference in the field. Once they reached those speeds, they really didn't have to work any harder than the other ones, but until they got there, they had to work harder. Now the hauling, now that makes sense. So that's the last test I wasn't going to do until I kind of came up with that hypothesis that if the tractor's working harder, or the vehicle's working harder, it's going to burn more fuel, which makes sense. So the final test was to test and see, well, if it has more horsepower, theoretically speaking, it shouldn't have to work as hard to get something going. And that was what I found out. So I only did this test over the course of 1.5 minutes. This is not a stationary test. The 280 horsepower only moved 0.73 kilometers, whereas the 313 moved 0.75. And the 280 to haul the load, which the load was 31,000 liters, I believe. Was it? We'll check it in a second. I have it out here. But as a load of corn, it burned more fuel, and I believe that's because it had to get it up and going, and that took more effort. So it burned 1.01 liters versus the 313 burned 0.89. So that makes sense. So, okay, so the corn I had, let's see what I had for a load here. 39,200 liters of corn. This is what I towed. So, anyhow, yeah, that's what I got for you guys. So obviously there's more things to explore with that and everything like that, but I think we've answered most of our questions. Horsepower in general doesn't matter until it's the fact that it's going to use more, or it's going to do work a little bit more efficiently probably, or do more work for you. But just stationary doesn't matter. Moving or stationary doesn't matter as far as fuel usage. It's more of what effort they're putting in. Hauling, it doesn't really matter for hauling. It just matters what's towing it. So obviously more horsepower is going to help you a little bit more. But just the fact that it's hauling, I don't think is what's adding to the fuel usage. Implement, if the implement's on, it matters. If it's off, it doesn't matter. Speed doesn't matter other than the effort to get it up to that speed. And repair does matter. So that's kind of all those questions I think answered to at least some extent or some degree. But yeah, feel free to do more testing in your own games and stuff, and let me know down in the comments if you found anything else out. But yeah, this has been Farmer Cop, guys. Thank you guys for coming and watching. If you enjoyed, drop a like down below. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button up on your screen to join the Farmer Cop channel, and turn on your notification bell so you don't miss any future videos I may post. This has been Farmer Cop. Thank you guys for coming and watching.